Hey everyone, welcome to WittCode, where in this video, we're going to learn how to use the useCallback React hook. So, to understand the useCallback hook, we need to first understand memoization. And memoization is a technique that remembers the output of a function rather than recalculating it. In other words, memoization caches output values based on the input. If the input has been used before, then the cached output value is returned as opposed to recalculating it. This increases the efficiency of an application as it minimizes the amount of times expensive functions or computations need to be ran or recomputed. So how does this relate to the useCallback hook? Well, the useCallback hook returns a memoized function. In JavaScript, functions are stored as references. Therefore, memoizing a function caches the reference. Memoizing a function is useful in React because if a function reference that is being passed as a prop to another component changes, it will trigger a re-render. Therefore, memoizing a function with useCallback can prevent a component from re-rendering unnecessarily. So to demonstrate the useCallback hook, we'll create two components, an app component and a list component. The list component will accept a function called handleClick as a prop and will list out 100 h4 tags. When one of these h4 tags is clicked, the handleClick function will be called. So here, these are just some Webpack errors that we'll fix soon. But here we just have a list component that is passed a handleClick method, and all it does is loop through an array of 100 values and print out 100 h4 tags saying user and then the index number. And now let's create our app component that will display this list component. We'll also create the handleClick function that is passed to the list component and handle some state as well. So here, when an h4 tag from the list component is clicked, it will change the state of the app component as the handleClick method will be triggered. So we can see you clicked on user 1, user 2, and we can see that as the state is changing, the app component and list component are both being re-rendered. As we can see, both of them are rendering, which we log here and here. And the list component is being re-rendered because when the app component is re-rendered, the handleClick method is being recreated. And as the handleClick method is passed as a prop to the list component, so it's passed here, the list component is re-rendered too. And this is a perfect example of when to use useCallback, as re-rendering this list component is not only unnecessary, but also expensive, as the only state we are changing is this user 3, or this text here. But we're re-rendering this whole list of 100 users. When in reality, all we want to change is just this line here. So, to stop the unnecessary re-rendering of our list component, we can use a combination of react.memo and useCallback. The react.memo function and useCallback hook are often used together. The react.memo function memoizes a component. Specifically, the react.memo function checks for prop changes. If it detects any, the component is re-rendered. If the props stay the same, then the component is not re-rendered. And as useCallback returns a memoized function, if we pass a memoized function as a prop to a memoized component, then the component will not re-render. To memoize the list component, import the memo function from React and place the list component inside it. And now that we've memoized our list component, so we import the memo function and wrap the whole list component with it here. So now that we've memoized it, we need to memoize the handle click function that is created inside our app component. If we memoize the handle click method, then the function reference that is passed as a prop to the list component will not change. As a result, react.memo will not detect any prop changes and the list component won't be re-rendered. We can memoize a function with the useCallback hook. Now, if we click on one of these users, the list component shouldn't be re-rendered. So we can see now that only the app component is being re-rendered and all these 100 users are not being re-rendered. So let's give more information now about the useCallback hook. So the useCallback hook takes a function to memoize as the first argument and an array of dependencies as the second, and returns a memoized function reference. When any of the dependencies provided in the second argument change, the function reference changes. Here, we don't have any dependencies listed because we provided an empty array. And now, as the handle click function and list component are both memoized, so our list component is memoized with React Memo, and our handle click function is memoized with useCallback, if we click any h4 tag from the list component, only the app component is re-rendered, which we saw by if we click any of these users, app component is re-rendered, and it just says, and this is the state that changes in app, and because the function reference for handle click that's being passed to the list component isn't changing, this component is not re-rendering, which is much more efficient. And now let's demonstrate some dependency usage with useCallback. First, we'll add some extra state to our app component. This state will keep track of the users that are listed out in the list component. Let's also create a memoized add user function that adds a user to the list when a button in the list component is clicked. However, let's make it so the new function reference is generated when the user's state changes. We can do this by listing it as a dependency. Now, in the list component, let's iterate over the users that are passed in, and also add a button that calls the add user function when it's clicked. Here, when we click this button, a new user is added to the user state in the app component. And this, because this changes the state here, causes a re-render. So if we added a new user, if we scroll all the way to the bottom, we can see user 100. Let's add another user. Now we have user 101. And what we can see also is both the app component and list component are both re-rendering again. Even though the add user function right here is memoized with useCallback, if the user's changes, then a new function reference is generated. So when its new function reference is passed in here to the list component, this is a prop change, which causes this list component to be re-rendered. So now let's just finish this video by talking about when to use the useCallback hook. So the useCallback hook should be used to prevent unnecessary re-renders. However, there is a trade-off between code readability and re-rendering. In other words, an unnecessary re-render isn't always detrimental to an application's performance, and adding useCallback everywhere can make code more complicated and harder to read. Simply put, premature performance operation can cause issues down the line, and therefore the useCallback hook is best used for computationally heavy calculations. But so this is my video on the useCallback hook. I want to thank you for liking and subscribing today, and I hope to see you in the next one. Have a good one.